Okay, and good evening and welcome to our Rural Support and Wellbeing webinar this evening. Tonight's topic is farm assurance and inspections. Just a couple of housekeeping things before we get going. Obviously, the webinar will be recorded this evening, just so that anybody that has registered that couldn't make it this evening can then watch. We can send the recording and they can watch it in their own time. We also share this webinar on our website and with our other agencies and parties. Just if you would like to have any questions, please feel free to raise them, unmute yourself, and by all means, ask away, or you can put your question in the chat and we will do our best to facilitate that this evening. The cameras are disabled just purely to try and limit any issues with internet connection. If there is anything that you want to not have shared on the recording this evening, then please send us an email. It might be best to email Nikki, which is NIKKI .Rattenbury, RATTENBURY @devon.gov.uk, or you can contact the phone number given on the screen, and we can make sure that anything, your name and details, are removed from the recording. So tonight's speakers, we have kindly agreed to come this evening, is Kate Cross from the Red Tractor and Rebecca Langdon from Heart of the Southwest Trading Standards. Okay, Kate, if you are ready to share your screen, I will stop sharing. And then hopefully...
I'm hoping you can all see Sally the sheep and,
we can.
and the shopper. So, firstly, thank you very much for inviting me along to give it, well, do a little bit of myth busting maybe, but also to answer any questions about Red Tractor Farm Assurance and the assessment visits that Red Tractor undertakes. And as we go through, I'll talk about who Red Tractor are, who actually undertakes the assessments on farm, and why, I always enjoy coming to these sessions where people say, we're going to talk about Red Tractor inspections and why we're not an inspectorate body, why Red Tractor is actually a certification scheme with a set of standards, and therefore our members of a voluntary scheme are actually certified to standards. We're not an inspectorate in that respect. So the title for today is really, can an assessment be a positive experience? I say this coming from an agricultural background. I have 3 brother-in-laws, all that are farming. All of them are Red Tractor members. So every time I see them, I definitely get questions about Red Tractor. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? You're asking me this, that, and the other now. But it's always a good, robust conversation about the standards and the requirements. But Red Tractor, can it be a positive experience? Hopefully you've all seen, because at the end of the day, yes, we might be involved in agriculture, we might be working with agricultural businesses, etc., but we are also consumers. So hopefully you will have seen, when you're out and about, you'll have seen the Red Tractor adverts. You may have heard the beep beep noise of the Red Tractor tractor when the adverts were on television, etc. But it is worth saying that Red Tractor is the buying spec for £17 billion worth of British produced food per annum. So, you're going to the supermarket, you'll see the logo on product, and that is telling you that the consumer, that the food you are buying has been farmed with care. So those are our adverts, our facts, etc., that we have on our consumer websites and we use throughout our marketing campaigns. So Red Tractor is a balance. It's an interesting one. Who we are and who we're owned by. So we are owned, if you will, by the whole food sector, from farming union organisations through to the retail sector, British Retail Consortium, and all have got stakeholder engagement within that side of things. But we have this requirement, if you will, as a certified scheme with the voluntary setup of standards, that we have a brand that I've just said is on £17 billion worth of food per annum. So we have this requirement of the shoppers for them to be guaranteed that their food has been produced safely and responsibly. And we're talking there about environmentally, animal welfare, medicine use, the people that are producing your food, the people that are cutting your cabbages for you, the people that are looking after the sheep, about that responsibility there. Government, they look to us, and as we have a good working relationship with trading standards, APHA, Environment Agency, etc. So parts of government look to us saying, well, actually, if an assured farm, they're meeting legal requirements plus the requirements of our standards. So they look at that side of things. Farmers, obviously, they want access to markets, and it is about being able to access as many markets as possible because we've got one core set of standards, that people are bought into. So it gives you maximum access to market rather than having different standards for different people and lots of different people coming down the farm drive. And then we've got the retailer, the caterer, brands, etc. That again, it's in their buying spec that they expect their people that they are sourcing product from to be assured. What happens if we do get it wrong? Now, 24 years ago, British agriculture, it was a bit of a crossroads. We had, obviously, BSE had hit foot and mouth. People were saying, well, can I trust British produced meat at the time? We already had some standards in place, but the decision was made to bring all the different assurance schemes that cover the different food groups together under one umbrella, and that being Red Tractor. So it's our 25th birthday next year. So, in that time, the world's changed, and consumer requests have changed. But the fact that if we get something wrong, how it can be negative for everybody is written up there on that slide. If consumers don't have any trust in the brand that they're seeing or the standards that we're working to, they'll disregard the logo and they'll just buy on price. If we get it wrong, government will increase inspections that are being done, the number of people that are going down farm drives. Farmers will lose market access, and they will also lose some controlling of how the standards are put together, that bit of realism, if you will, that we try to ensure is within the standards. And then retailers and food services will also look to do their own set of standards as they go through. That's the marketing bit. World of certification, this is the world I live in. And certification, it's a strange world until you actually get into it. It's a bit like the world of inspections. But it is a process, and our requirement for the certification bodies that we work with is that they are accredited for the delivery of they are accredited to an international standard, ISO 17065. If anybody has insomnia, I would recommend reading it. And if you get bored with that, 17063, which is the inspectorate one, you can also read that. But all our certification bodies have to be accredited to that standard by UKAS, the ISO 17065. So that's the processes that they go through. So our standards, we as Red Tractor own the standards, but we license them to 4 certification bodies. So the 4 certification bodies will deliver on the ground assessments. So the people that actually go down the farm drives aren't Red Tractor employed personnel. I do go down farm drives, and as I do say to people, if I turn up, it's probably because something's gone wrong. But our assessors that go down farm drives are actually employed by or self-employed contractors that are working for one of the 4 certification bodies that we work with, and their logos are on the bottom of that screen. One of them is going through a bit of a merger at the moment and will now be referred to as Intertek SAI Global, but there's still a lot of members will say that they're members of Red Tractor through SAI. So Red Tractor, that's us, if you will, are the standards owner, and we set out the rules and procedures by which the certification bodies work through. So they manage the memberships of those farms. So a member would apply to a certification body and pay the certification body for their certification, for their assessment visits, for that side of things. But we as Red Tractor work with those certifications very closely. We have KPIs in terms of measuring them, how they're working. We'll also work closely with them on issues management and act on any intelligence from third parties that may come through. So, we all get the phone call, someone's been out for a walk on a Sunday afternoon and they've seen, slurry running down a field or something that they believe isn't in line with requirements in respect of animal health and welfare. So we'll deal with them through Red Tractor with our certification bodies. Roles and responsibilities. So I said Red Tractor works with the 4 certification bodies that deliver certification to our standards. It is worth just noting at this point, NIFCC is based in Northern Ireland and they work predominantly in Northern Ireland. They do a couple of meat processing, Red Tractor meat processing standards over on the mainland, but their predominantly work is in Northern Ireland. They do dairy for us and mainly poultry processing side of things. QWFC is based in Wales. Again, they do a lot of dairy for us in Wales, but they also own their own scheme, and I'll pick that one up in a moment. But the reason for mentioning those two, as well as SAI and NSF, is they work directly with the farmers, but they will also work with others in the supply chain. So our dairy setup is that the dairy first purchaser, as we refer to them, so the milk buyer, has a contract with a certification body to undertake the assessments of their farms for dairy. So there's different relationships at play in with the certification bodies and Red Tractor. So NIFCC, QWFC working in Wales and Northern Ireland, but they also have their own schemes. So you may have heard of FAWL in Wales, Farm Assured Welsh Livestock, LMC in Northern Ireland, QMS, Quality Meat Scotland in Scotland. So they're devolved standards that cover certain sectors up there as well. But what we're trying to do is work with those schemes to align standards and minimise audit burden where someone has multiple schemes in play. So we own the standards, so we write them, we consult on them, and we produce the standards, and I'll talk about that in a moment about how that's done. The farms, the sites are members of Red Tractor, and the certification body assess to those standards and determine if someone is compliant with the requirements of the standards, and therefore they are responsible for the certificate for that membership. So it's a certificate of membership that happens. We as Red Tractor retain the right to terminate a membership, but the certification body retains the right to suspend and withdraw a certificate. I know it all sounds like semantics, but those terminologies are really key when we're talking to a member or a member's making contact with us about what's happening with their membership. You know, we'll all have had the phone calls or been out in the pub and someone's coming on about my Red Tractor assessment today and I failed my assessment. A member won't fail their assessment because it is a certification process against standards. Therefore, they may have non-conformances raised against requirements of the standards, but they will be given a period to address those non-conformances. The only time that they wouldn't be given at the moment a 28-day period to address those non-conformances is if the severity of those non-conformances is such that it's deemed a major, so total disregard for the requirements of the standards, then we may suspend the certificate on the day to ensure they can't sell any product as Red Tractor. But people don't fail their assessments. As I said, it's a certification process, so they'll have non-conformances raised, and then they'll be given a period to address those non-conformances to retain certification. It's an ongoing certification process. But just back to the geographical spread, I mentioned FAWL and NIFCC QMS, but it's just worth noting what we as Red Tractor do cover. We cover poultry, as in meat poultry, across the UK. So ducks, turkeys and chicken, broiler, Poussin, free range, enhanced welfare, we cover that across the UK. Produce or fresh produce, lettuce, hops, watercress, you know, anything else that you'd in essence produce in this country and comes under fresh produce banner. We are seeing a lot of innovation in that area, and I'm sure you guys are as well. Innovation in that area where, you know, it's not just your traditional glass houses or field sites anymore. We're seeing vertically integrated farms. We're seeing, you know, a lot more of that side of things coming in that. But they are looking for that certification for their product. Dairy, we're across the UK. Pigs, we cover England, Wales and Northern Ireland. Scotland has its own scheme under the QMS brand, but we have mutual recognition, so in that respect. Crops, we cover England and Wales, because again, Scotland has Scottish quality crops. Northern Ireland has its Northern Irish quality assured mark for crops as well. England, for beef and lamb, we're England only because of the devolved schemes. And then we do cover dairy goats, the milk side of dairy goats in the UK. So yeah, it is worth, like I said, we have mutual recognition in sectors for the different schemes as well. So that if a product, say, was produced in Scotland under the QMS brand, it could be deemed that it's assured and going to assured product. But that, I think, is a key bit just to help you understand what sectors we as Red Tractor cover, and the fact that, you know, a lot of the farms we'll be dealing with won't be single scope, as we call them, membership. So if they're a dairy member, they would need a beef membership to be able to sell their cattle as assured, because the dairy actually only covers the milk element of it. Yeah, and so yeah, so we'll pick up that one. A little bit about the standards, how we develop the standards. We don't sit in our ivory tower in London. We do go through a process working with various committees and boards that we have. So every sector will have what's known as a technical advisory committee, which is made up of farmers, growers, representatives from every stage of the supply chain. And they will help us with our technical managers. So we have a technical manager for each scheme. See what's, you know, do that horizon scanning, see what's required of the marketplace in terms of how we can stand behind that fond with care tagline, and develop the standards that sit with that. So we will develop our standards, then we will go out to consultation to ensure that, you know, people understand what the standards are and they fit with the ways of working. And we do take on board feedback from consultation. You know, we will work through the information that's sent back to us. Back in 2021, we had discussions about the use of Hornex paste within the cattle sector, and you know, it's a paste that burns away, if you will, at the buds, the horn buds on calves. And we had the discussion about whether or not we should allow the use of that within Red Tractor. And it was feedback from a number of producers saying, well, I use it quite effectively. I've been trained to use it. I use analgesic with it for the calves, etc. So we took that feedback on board and we've let it as standard. Yes, we have requirements about what you need to do if you are using it, but it was determined that we could write standards to ensure effective use of it and, you know, minimise risks from it. So we do take consultation and work on that. And then when we get to a consensus, we will then publish our standards and give people due notice that standards are changing and what they'll be assessed against. And none of our standards are behind closed doors. They're all readily available on the website. Anybody can access our standards, so it's not a closed club, if you will, and you have to be a member to know what our standards are. They're readily available out there. This slide for me is how it can be quite simple, if you will. A lot of people think about farm assessment, so they'll have the routine assessment, be it on a 12, 18-month cycle, depending on what sort of stock or crops they're growing. They'll have their assessment. They may have some non-conformances raised. They will provide the corrective action for that, those non-conformances to the certification body. That will say they'll be happy that it signs off and shows that that member is compliant with the requirements and standards, or able to show they are meeting the standards. And then the next assessment will take place 12, 18 months down the line. They may have some different non-conformances. That one, they may not have any non-conformances, and then it'll just be routine assessment. But it's a cycle, if you will. We have the options within our membership rules to do spot checks, and we require our certification bodies to do spot checks, you know, just to check ongoing compliance within the certificated tool. So we have that. But what we did do a few years back now was bring in a bit of a disruptor model, because we found that some people were maybe going along thinking, well, it's all right if I've got some non-conformances. The assessor will come out, tell me what's wrong, and then I've got 28 days to sort it out. So it's not a problem. And we thought, well, actually, that's a reputational risk to Red Tractor, to the scheme, to the brand, and actually to the whole of agriculture in that respect. So we brought in something called our risk-based model. And this is in dairy, pigs and poultry. You know, as you'll appreciate, they probably are riskier ones in terms of human-animal interaction and the consumer thought process about how their food is produced in those sectors. So we brought in the disruptor model here called risk-based. So a member would have an assessment, and then depending on the number and nature of non-conformances, so it isn't a set number, but depending on the number and nature of non-conformances, they may be required to have a spot check under risk-based. If they still have a high number of non-conformances at that assessment, again, depending on the number and nature, they may get the certificate suspended for a period, which, as you'll appreciate in the dairy sector, if your certificate's suspended and you can't sell your milk as assured, you've got limited marketplace, so it has quite a big financial impact straight away on that respect. You provide your corrective, you have another spot check. If everything's okay, you're able to demonstrate good compliance, you go back onto the cycle. Unfortunately, if you're unable to do that and there's still disregard for the requirements of the standards, it could lead to revoking of that member's membership for a period, normally a period of 4 weeks. Again, as you'll all appreciate, that can have quite a big impact on the financial viability of that farm. But what we have found in the period that this has been at work, probably the last, 4 years now, notwithstanding COVID, is people now don't go back to the old model of saying, well, I've got an assessment, I've got 28 days after that to correct anything the assessor tells me wrong. They're aware of the standards and much more working within those as they go through the year. As I keep saying to lots of people or anybody that listen, there shouldn't be anything in the standards that isn't good business practice to start off with. It might be, what do I need that bit of paper for? Actually, it's good business practice to have that, to have written protocols, to have something to refer back to. So there is that, and I will stand behind that statement any day of the week. So Red Tractor, tools-wise, I can't give you a set of sheep and a nice dog on a bale of straw, but we do have a website that has lots of information on there. It has support information for members. Like I said, the rules of membership, the standards are readily available. It's all available on the website. We have templates on there. We have the information on there about compliance. Only this week, there was a report out that probably challenged. It talked about the fact that as a scheme, we maybe didn't have any teeth. We were just looking after our own. But what we do actually, we've got under the compliance tab there, we have quarterly data about the number of farms that may have been suspended within that period. So had a period where they couldn't sell their product as assured, and then the number that we maybe revoked within a year. And it, within the last calendar 12 months, 2,500 of our members. So we've got 44,000 members, not 44,000 members across the different schemes. 2,500 of them will have been suspended for a period for either non-submission of corrective evidence or not having their assessment on time. And then unfortunately, we've had to revoke 300 members within that period, again, because they haven't completed the requirements in terms of providing corrective evidence for the non-conformances that were raised at their assessments. So we have 350 assessors that go out assessing Red Tractor standards. They do 60,000 assessments a year, both full assessments, spot checks, etc. And what we do, we'll have the most common non-conformances. Some people in the organisation talk about the top 10 non-conformances. I'd rather say the most common non-conformances. And we talk about how you can ensure that you don't become one of those statistics in terms of having those non-conformances. Yes, a number of the most common ones are paper-based ones, but I would suggest, it's good business practice to have a health and safety policy on farm. As we know, within agriculture, we don't have the best of reputations at being able to keep our employees and people in good nick on farm in terms of health and safety, accidents, etc. So there is the different resources on the website there about the most common non-conformances. There's templates as well on there. We have something called our tracker service, which tells the industry who may be wanting to make that Red Tractor claim which farms are assured or not, so they'd be able to look to see whether or not anybody's fallen out of assurance, and that's where the industry watch list, they'd they'd track the farms that they have a working relationship with, and then they'd be informed if they were suspended or there was any change to the membership status for them. So there's the checker services that the industry uses and different people use. Talk about that. I've just got someone ringing up from an abattoir now trying to chase me about a membership. I'm actually pointing back to that. But also we have the resource for our members about, as I said, quite a bit of our standards and document side of things. So we have something called a portal, in essence, an online filing cabinet where they can upload the documents as they go through, ready for their assessment. And then rather than the assessor spending time on farm, sat in the farm office looking at the documentation, the assessor can look at that pre-assessment and be able to deliver, delve into things as an audit trail on farm because they've had pre-information to help them decide which fields they want to look at in a crops assessment, a little bit about if they've got the biosecurity policy or the herd health plan, a little bit they can look into that and then look more at, the PARF protocols and things like that. So that's an online filing cabinet we're using. We started it in COVID and we developed it, and we're working to improve it all the time so that, in essence, the audit burden on the member is reduced because we're splitting out how different things happen rather than it be quite an intense visit from an assessor when they come down the drive. So I think that, she says, should all pull back together, and it is, in my head, and I am, at the end of the day, a fairly simple person from up north, it's a fairly, we've got standards that are accessible to people, regardless of what's business you're running within agriculture. The standards are accessible to you. Nothing in there that isn't good business practice. We've got professional trained assessors. Those 350 assessors we've got have all been through Red Tractor training. They all understand how to communicate with a member. We got through a lot of that side of things, both them understanding the standards, but also soft skills. We've got competent reviewers and certifiers within that certification process, so they understand agriculture and understand what needs to be shown to show compliance. Got the correct data, the right farm, the right holding number, the right business, etc., so that we can match all that data up. We've got use of data as we go through as the industry moves on, things like e-medicine books within the pig sector, electronic movement data to help us understand traceability, etc. But I think the key one on all that is the engaged members. You put them all together, it gives you a robust scheme that the consumer, the person that's going out, buying the product, looking for that British product with the logo on, has got that confidence that, it's been farmed with care. And we as Red Tractor can stand behind the fact that we've got every member is meeting every standard every day, and therefore you've got that trust in compliance. And that's me. Any questions?
Oh, sorry, I couldn't unmute myself then. Thanks ever so much, Kate. That's brilliant. I'll just give it a couple of minutes in case anyone does have any questions they want to ask. Oh, yeah, I think, yeah, please just ask away. That's lovely.
Hello,
Hi.
Bridget here. Yeah, I noticed I've come up as BW for some reason. Bridget, well, I just wonder about some of the, you were talking about earlier about major and minors and, things that are that bad. We once had threatened with a major non-conformance because we couldn't prove that we didn't have, I can't remember what they're called now, certain chemical in our washing powder that we use for
QAC.
That's the one. Now the list of ingredients didn't have it on it, but that was not acceptable because it might have been there. And I was literally phoning the owner of the company because it wasn't a standard product. We'd bought it from a local laundry. Yeah. He was literally the owner of the company. I ended up getting through to him on the phone while he was driving somewhere. He had to phone his chemist and his chemist had to write an email. And I had to do that on the same day. Otherwise, we would have been closed down on major. And it's things like that that I just find completely, the stress of it when something for us, really small, and I would have thought the ingredients list on it would have been fine, just seems to become a major issue. And I just, who decides what's a major and what's a minor?
So within the standards, if you looked on the Red Track standards, there's something called key standards, and the key standards are the ones that a major and minor can be raised against. And I'm just looking at, how long ago was it?
It was probably 20 or 21, because I remember it being associated with COVID. You know, it was a weird inspection.
Yeah,
she was here, but it was it online, I think, actually. It was a video call, and I had to show her everything on the line, or send her the evidence, or take a photo.
So so within the standards, said there's key standards, and with it, it's those key standards that can be raised as a major or a minor. Now, the major would be total disregard for the requirements of the standards, and a minor would be something like, you know, you've asked the question, but you haven't got the data sheet to back it up, and things like that. So who makes that decision? So the assessor, and this is why I'll stress the fact it's a certification process. The assessor their primary role is to go out and look for evidence of compliance. It's not to go out looking for non-conformances. It's to gather information to show compliance with the requirements of the standards. So they would be gathering that evidence, and it would be the technical managers back at the certification bodies, the certification officers, who would be determining if the information they provided is sufficient to warrant a major. So it wouldn't be a major is never one person's decision. They would report it back, and then the certification body personnel would verify whether or not it was a major, not the assessor directly. So it sounds like something falling. It should be, you know, they would say, you know, so I'm writing this down. It may be raised as a major, which would result in suspension, but I will have to phone that into the office, and someone from the certification body will come back to you about it. So it's not the assessor. Like I said, their role is to gather objective evidence. It's not to be the policeman, if you will, a police person of things.
Has that been the situation since, you know, for that period of time? Because it was she made it very clear. I mean, she was very nice. It wasn't wasn't some horrible attitude, but she was telling me that I had to find that she couldn't, if she signed this visit inspection off with that outstanding, it would be a major. That's what she told me.
Well, she should have run that back to the office. I can't say. If you want to offline, and I can check who the assessment was with, etc. But I can't. It shouldn't. It shouldn't have come to that stage. Saying, you know, that threat shouldn't be like that. That, you know, I will say I've got to call it back into the office and make sure that, you know, because it is the certification body's responsibility to verify it is a major, and therefore undertake the suspension of the certificate. It's not the assessor to say. The assessor would report back what they have or haven't seen, and then say, I believe it's a major, and then someone from the certification body would, So
it's not certain. The way I sort of understood it, the way she said, was that there were certain what do you call them, compliances, things that if certain standards that if she didn't have the evidence, it would be major, whereas others would be you know, an action point.
The way our standards work is there's key standards, which are the ones that say key after them. They're the ones that can be either a major or a minor non-conformance. Major may result in suspension of your certificate. A minor would be the same as the 28 days. And then the other ones that don't say key after them, they're either just compliant or non-compliant. But a key standard, a major being raised, is total disregard for the requirements of the standards, and that would always be back to the scheme manager in that respect.
Okay, it's therefore, like you said, it's an interpretation of an attitude rather than just something not there, you know, not an automatic. Okay.
The only caveat I'm going to chuck in there is if it was only red tractor that was being assessed, there are some milk buyers that undertake assessments at the same time.
Yeah, no, I know. We do have a few. We do have a few, but that wasn't one of them.
No, I'm just going to say, because I know some milk buyers, the whole, particularly cheese ones, the whole QA quacks, as they're referred to, and the risk to food from them, well, that's why it came in as a standard, to be honest, in terms of
Okay.
that side of things. But yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Rebecca.
Oh yeah, hi Kate. Yeah, I'm Becky. I work with Nikki and Becky in the rural team. A couple of questions. I just went, are there any restrictions on the sizes of farms that can apply to be Red Tractor? And also I wondered, obviously when we do farm visits and on behalf of Food Standards Agency, we always ask if they've had any non-compliances. Do we get made aware of sort of any suspensions, terminations, or I know you said there's you can access that. Yeah.
So any restrictions on size, there is no restriction size. I think there may be some smaller farms that wouldn't think it's viable depending on their marketplace that they're entering into. We cover about 98% of the dairy industry, probably about, it varies, the finished beef, it'll be 70% probably, but beef herds a bit be less than that because of the whole supply, the way the businesses are set up.
Yeah.
But there isn't any restriction on size. It's about being able to meet the requirements of the standards and being prepared in the end of the day to join a voluntary scheme in that respect. Now, it is in the world of dairying, if they are a registered first purchaser, and again, the list of all registered first purchasers on the Red Tractor website, we have first purchaser rules, and those registered first purchasers can only lift milk from Red Tractor assured farms.
Okay.
So there's that side of it. Then your next question about FSA and having access to the information. What we have is something called a Delta list, which I'm sure some of your colleagues will probably be aware of. And that is at the month end, we tell you about farms that maybe have been have come out of the scheme. So they've voluntary come out of the scheme, but we also do daily withdrawal alerts that would go to say this farm has been withdrawn from the system, from the scheme, what scheme it's been withdrawn from, and then you'll be able to click through from that email to see if it's a farm in your locality, etc. So we do have that. So it might be worth picking up with the team you work with if anybody's got access to that. It's yeah.
I'm sure.
I can just, I was going to say, I can just jump in there. We do have that, Beck. I can send you it. But what we don't get necessarily is we get quite good information from the AIC who do task and things like that. But we don't always know why people have either come out of the scheme voluntary or whether they've been asked to leave. That's the kind of thing I think we're maybe working on a bit. But we do have a list, Beck, and I'll send you the link for that. Because that'll tell you.
I can follow up on that one. So have they been? They'll be with so I mentioned suspensions before. If a member doesn't close out the non-conformances within 28 days, they would be suspended because it's continuous certification, because they haven't been able to maintain the certification. They'd be suspended. Then they can stay at suspended for 3 months.
Okay.
And then if they don't address it to the certification body's satisfaction, they would be withdrawn. And therefore you would get notification of those withdrawn ones. That means that they've made the decision not to close out non-conformances or not to have their assessment visit, etc. So they've been withdrawn. So in essence, we've said, you're not a member of our scheme anymore. The ones that got on the Delta that have been closed are ones that they've made the decision not to renew. So they haven't fallen out of assurance. They've decided at the point where they renew, pay the fees, that they no longer wish to be assured. So the ones that have probably been asked to leave in that are the ones that be on the withdrawal because they've got to the point where they haven't closed out the non-conformances, they refused an assessment, therefore their certificate has been withdrawn.
That makes sense. That helps a lot.
Yeah, nice. Thanks, Kate. That's really helpful.
No problem.
Okay, I think you might be like, I haven't got any more questions in the chat or anything, so that's really good, Kate. Thanks ever so much. Becky Langdon is now going to do a presentation on farm inspections. You are very welcome to stay, and any input that you would like to give would be very welcomed. But obviously, if you would like to go as well, because it is eating into your evening, I totally appreciate that. So over to you, Becky.
Thank you. Hopefully.
I can see that. So
can you see that?
It's working. Yeah.
Perfect, thank you. So yeah, I'm Rebecca Langdon, part of a duo probably from the Heart of the Southwest Trading Standards Service with my colleague Naomi. We're the lead officers for agriculture. So we sort of look at all the lists and draw up lists for farm inspections each year really, and keep an eye on all of that. So the point of this session from our point of view really, again, about farm inspections, maybe dispelling some myths that may be out there, but just to be clear about, you know, why we come, who we are, who we might bring with us, what happens during the visit, and then what might happen after the visit, just so that you can be sort of clear and not worried if you do get a letter or information to say you're going to have an inspection. So first of all, why do we do it? We are what we call an intel-led service. So we try to only visit farms for a reason. And there's numerous reasons why we might do that. One of those would be a slaughterhouse referral. So if maybe somebody's transported an animal to a slaughterhouse and it's maybe arrived there without being able to get up, or with an injury, or the vet is concerned about how that animal's been transported, then they'll refer that to the local authority as well as the Animal and Plant Health Agency. And then we might, if it's something that we don't think we need to do anything else about immediately, we'd probably give the farmer a ring, and then we put it on our visit list. So they would be contacted throughout the year or at a point during the year to have an inspection. We get obviously a lot of information from members of the public. So if it's not a serious, urgent welfare inspection, then we might just put that on our list and visit them at some point during the financial year that the list is drawn up. We also get information about abnormalities for livestock movements or identification, and that can be a variety of things. So people may have seen movements or been reported to us that movements have taken place maybe when they shouldn't have done. Disease control concerns, obviously a big one for us would be TB. So if we have any concerns about people being late for a test or not presenting all the animals that they have, something that's non-urgent really, these are what the kind of things that would go on our list. If it was urgent, then we'd probably be going out there a lot sooner. That would be a different type of inspection, and therefore we would probably come unannounced for those kind of things, especially as there's a report for immediate urgent welfare or a report of fallen stock. So the main bulk of the visits we do, they are announced, and I'll explain how we do those and how we go about those. But we do have a few that will be unannounced, but we'll always introduce ourselves, who we are and why we're there and who we're with. And then obviously we do also do visits to premises that aren't farm assured, and we still have quite a few of those on our database, and still premises that we have never visited either. Maybe they're new, or maybe they've just never had a visit and sort of slipped through the net a little bit. So who are we? So we're all trading standards officers. We come from the rural team, so we're a specific set of officers that are trained, keep a competency, keep up to date with legislation. So we are well up to date as to what the standards or what the legislation says, I should say, for us, and that's how we carry out our visits and compare how things should be to what the legislation says. We sometimes might come with a veterinary officer, and they're from the Animal and Plant Health Agency. That's usually if there's a complaint about or a concern about animal welfare. They might contact us, or we will contact them, and we'll come together. Again, if we will come sometimes, and these will be announced visits, so we'll come together and explain why we're there, and they will also have a look and look at the welfare of the animals. And then sometimes we might bring other people. Again, these will always, if they're in part of this visits, they will be announced, and we'll explain who's coming with us when we come. So we do have trainees within Trading Standards Service. We also work with dairy hygiene inspectors, egg inspectors, the Environment Agency, and sometimes where it's appropriate, and you may already have been involved with the Farming Community Network, or RABI. They're farming charities that can help support you if you need maybe some financial support, or just need somebody to talk to about farming and how things are going, or you might need a direction in something that they can help with. So they may be there already, or we will ask you if you feel that they want them to be there when we come and inspect. It's usually all mutual agreement that we do that. So like I say, it's a pre-booked and announced visit, usually by phone call or an email or a letter. That'll be from the officer who's going to come. The letter may not say the reason for the visit other than it's an annual a routine inspection. So that's probably usually what it will say. And then it will cover what's included in the visit. And I'll show you an example of that in a moment. And then it will say, then that's your opportunity to have the details of the officer and discuss with them if you need any extra requirements, things like somebody to sign for you, a translator or a carer, or again, somebody like the FCN or Rabbi, if they've been supporting you, they would be welcome to be there at the inspection as well. And we'll also say if we're going to bring a trainee or APHA or anybody else with us at the time. So it's about booking something that's convenient for everybody, a convenient time and date. So we'll usually send a letter. If it's a letter or an email, we'll send a letter sort of suggesting a date and time, and then it can be changed if it's not convenient. It's not a problem. And then we'll just, by mutual agreement, we'll make another appointment time to come and see you. We'll confirm that in writing, and we can do that again by email or letter. And then you'll have our contact details. So if you need to get hold of us after that, then you'll know who we are and when we're coming. And obviously if something comes up last minute, then that's fine. You just feel free to contact us and we'll try and rearrange it for when we can after that. Like I say, we do these visits by mutual agreement. It's not we are coming at this time. It's this is a date I suggest is convenient. If it's convenient for you, then can we come and do an inspection? So this is just a sort of sample of, if I sent you an email, this is probably what it would look like. You probably can't read the finer detail. It's not really necessary, but it's just to give you an idea of how the email would be laid out. So if you saw something like this, you probably could recognise that it was from a trading standards officer from the local council. And this is what you'd be saying. So we're saying this is the legislation at the top, and then we would like to come and inspect on this day. And then it tells you a bit about what your responsibilities are and why we're coming to look. So we're coming to look at the animals while we're there, but primarily it's about feed. So we're looking at how you store feed, where you store feed, looking at your vet medicines and how you store those and the records associated with it, as well as things like feed records. So that kind of lays down the basics of what we're looking for, and then you can contact us back there, or it gives you a telephone number at the bottom if you wanted to ring someone. Equally, you might receive a letter in the post, and this would be the format that you would receive it and how it would arrive. Again, similar format to the email, really. It's just the legislation, a bit about what we want to do while we're there, suggesting a date and time of when we think we could come, but it's always changeable. So you can always give us a ring if you want to change it for another date. That's usually okay. Obviously, we can't continuously change it, but we are welcome to making sure that it's a convenient time for yourselves. We don't just want to turn up when you're not going to be available. So that's kind of the layout that you would receive. So again, if you got something like this in the post, you could see, you could recognize it straight away that it's from us. So the visit itself, when we arrive, we'll always introduce ourselves, and we carry an ID card on a lanyard, and also we'll have a warrant card which we can show. We bring our own cleansing and disinfecting equipment, so we bring water, bucket and disinfectant with us, and we'll make sure that we cleanse before we come on, and we'll always be wearing waterproof wellies and appropriate top as well, and usually lots of layers if it's getting colder now in the winter. So in the farm inspection, as I've touched on a bit already, these are the things that we're really looking for. And this is sort of expands on what the letter says. We're looking at the buildings, so to make sure they're sound, secure, got bedding, that they are suitable for housing livestock if they are being housed at the time, that there's no obvious hazards, that there's enough dry lying area for all the animals that are being housed there, that they've got access to food and water if it's necessary, but that the water troughs are fairly clean, or that there's a routine in place to clean them. We're looking at the feed store, making sure that it's weather and pest proof, so we'll be asking about a bait plan. A lot of this follows what a farm assurance inspection would be, but this is the legislation that we're following rather than a set of standards. So that's where it may differ a little bit, but it's very similar things. So asking you if you've got a bait plan, how you're protecting your feed from pests, not just rats and things, but birds and everything like that, making sure there's no contaminants, no heavily moldy feed, that water's not saturated where you're trying to store it, that kind of thing. So we're just looking to make sure, common sense approach of that you're keeping your feed the best you can, because it's expensive and you don't want it to get damaged. So we're just making sure that you're doing that as well as you can. We look at your medicine storage, make sure that it's in date, that it's stored appropriately, so in a locked cupboard or in a store. We look at the records associated with that. And then while we're there, we try to incorporate as much as we can. So if you use a livestock vehicle, then we have a look at that and we'll check any authorizations you may have if you're transporting for others. We look at the feed and the water troughs, again, making sure that we don't expect them to be spotlessly clean, but we need to see that there is a routine of keeping them clean, and that the feed that's in there is not old moldy feed and you're not just topping up on the top. So it's common sense things really, keeping your animals the best they can. We're just sort of checking in on those things. While we're there, we look obviously at the livestock, make sure they've got identification. This is where all the single tag cows generally come to the front, or the ones without any tags. They seem to make their way straight to the barrier. But we're just making sure that you've got that they're tagged. Sheep, make sure they're tagged, and that their general welfare is good. They've got good body condition. They've been looked after. They've got good husbandry in place, and like I say, they've got enough room, enough dry lying area, that kind of thing. And then we look at all the records that you have. So we would look at your movement records, your medicine records, your feed receipts, feed records, and then obviously the records relating with births and deaths as well. With the feed, we also will ask you about spraying, if you keep it, or if you keep any fertilizer, whether you're spraying any fertilizers or any kind of spraying that you might do of pesticides. We'll check all those records as well while we're there. So you'll have most of this information before we come, so you can have it prepared. And like I say, it's very similar to farm assurance if you are farm assured, because although we try not to overburden and visit farm assured premises, there will be occasions where we have to. So that's how we sort of explain it. But otherwise, it's quite a straightforward process. And then we always offer advice and guidance while we're there as well. So we'll give you business support, refer you to the Future Farm Resilience Project at the moment. It's quite a popular one. But we also have this thing called the Growth Hub. So if you're looking to expand your business in any other way, then we have a Growth Hub that we can refer you to. We also always make sure to check in with you, really, make sure people are okay generally, if you have mental health or wellbeing concerns. Referring you to someone like the FCN who can talk to you, or maybe Rabbi, who usually just before the kids go back to school, they start to run the Uniform Help Project, which is about financially supporting farmers with the help of buying uniform. So we tried to sort of tailor what we know and what we can tell you about those kind of different charities that are available. And then we always leave you with some paperwork if you'd like, or if you prefer email, we'll email you afterwards. And that will just explain what we've looked at usually. And if there's anything we think that you maybe just need to do, then that will be done on that visit report form. So just an example of what the paperwork looks like that we complete. This is the form we fill in for ourselves, and this is the Food Standards Agency form. It's quite a long form. Some of it won't be applicable. This is just a couple of example pages, really, that most people we would fill in for. It's quite detailed, but it's just for the FSA so that we can show that we're doing our visits and we're checking in with people. And then the paperwork that you would get a copy of would be our visit report form, which is on the yellow paper on the left-hand side of my screen. And then something we call a notice of powers and rights. That's just to say, this is who we are, and we've come on this day, and we, in effect, using our powers to come onto your premises and inspect it. But we're always doing this on these type of visits by mutual agreement. So we ask you to sign it to say you consent to that. But the yellow form is where all the information will be written. If there's anything we think you need to follow up on, then that will all be written down there, again, with our contact details. So if you need to get hold of us after the visit, you've forgotten something or something's come up, then it will all be written on there so you can get hold of us after that. And then just a few things to finish off with, really, just some examples of some good things that we've seen. And then we do have, unfortunately, a lot of bad photos, but I've just chosen a couple of things that are quite common that we see on farms, maybe. So if we work from the top left, there's a good example of good storage there with a dumpy bag off the ground on a pallet with a sheet over the top to protect it from any pests. You'd expect probably some sort of bait plan or some good cats to be around there as well, but you can see that's clean and dry and well stored. You don't need something like that's on the right hand side, those big feed stores there. We see those quite commonly, probably more on dairy farms, but you can store it just as well on a pallet covered over in the dumpy bag as well. And then a good example of some nice silage wrap storage there, covered over and netted well. And then, unfortunately, a couple of examples in the bottom corner. The bottom corner is round feeder, but unfortunately the netting hasn't been removed, or the plastic's not been removed, so the animals could still have a chomp on that because there's nothing else in there for them to eat. And then contaminated water Again, wouldn't expect it to be clean, but expect it to be cleaned out regularly so that there's a plan in place to get rid of all of that. At the moment, we're also doing water sampling. So if you would like us to, or we're there and we think it's appropriate, we will take a sample of the water and send that away for analysis. So that's running throughout this the autumn time now. We've got a few of those to do, and we'll take that directly from the source of water, so from the trough. And I think, then just one more slide. This is just a bit about what happens if things aren't quite right at the time. So if we were to see some examples of those things, the non-compliance ones at the bottom, we are very much about advice and guidance. So we're not coming in with an iron fist to sort of take action straight away. We always try to work with businesses, give you clear, practical advice on how to rectify the issues. So that's all laid out in the visit report form. And then we may want to revisit if we think it's appropriate, or we might ask you to send some photos to show that you've done the rectifications. That's quite, easier to do than us to come back and see you again. For something straightforward like cleaning a water trough or tidying up a feed store, then a photograph would be great for that. We can also then, if there's things still aren't quite right, we can signpost you, like I said before, about the Heart of the Southwest Growth Hub, and then obviously FFR at the moment. So we are very much about that. And then if things we thought there was immediate risk to feed safety, then we might issue an improvement or emergency prohibition. That's very, very last minute, high risk things that we think need to be rectified immediately. We don't do that very often at all, to be honest, and we would always probably come and talk about that before we were to issue anything like that. But it would be an immediate risk to animal and human health before we would do that. And then obviously there is enforcement action if we think necessary, but that's not going to come usually from a first visit. That will come from something much more in-depth and continued, and usually when there is some quite serious animal welfare concerns that we would then consider enforcement action. That's always our last resort. We very much try to work with people through some advice and guidance first, and then with the help of the charities to sort of help people through these things. And then if we still can't get to where we need to be, we can consider enforcement action, but at the very last thing that we would do. And I think that is all of mine complete. I don't know if anybody had any questions.
Oh, Kate's put her hands up there, Beck. Oh, you're on mute.
Kate, you're on mute.
I switched my camera on rather than my microphone. There you go. So it's interesting some of the things that you're checking. So we obviously have standards regarding mixing of feeds and local authority approval.
Yep.
And a lot of members don't know about that. It seems to be quite geography specific about whether or not trading standards are doing a lot of that.
As in registrations or approval?
Registrations.
Yeah, so we did seem to have an influx of people registering a few years ago, maybe when the regs first came out, and then not so much anymore, the occasional one. So we do pick those up as we go along. So that's part of another reason why you might come on the visit list, is that if you are Red Tractor, but no, and then we don't have a farm assurance a registration for you, then we might put you on a list to come and visit you and then to register you. So we are working through. There are still some that aren't registered.
Because they don't expire, do they? It's once you're registered as a business, but if you train, we do say to them, if you change your trading titles, because that's what we find a lot of, is changing. You need to make sure you are registered with the appropriate name, and it's same for the transport authorization ones as well. Yeah,
they do expire. But registration, no, it goes on. But what we do find is quite often is somebody might have registered. Well, we have like different R codes basically, and an R code 10 would be somebody that's mixing or high risk, mixing straights and things like that. They might have given that up and go to somebody just as buying in feed. So that would be then an R13. So it's a much lower risk. So we do find people change between the registrations, but if we find that when we're on farm, then we just change your registration code. It's a free process, registration. It doesn't cost anything. And we don't always have to come and visit you before we register you. We will register you and then put you on our list to come and visit you in the next 12 months, mainly for farms we do. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Becky, you can't have any questions.
Oh no, I don't want to freak you out. No, definitely. That sounds good. No, I was just thinking it was a really good summary, and I'm just thinking, like, for us internally, whether we should do something like an advice to business leaflet and put that in, send that with when we book an appointment, because it's like a really reassuring way that you put it. And I don't know, it's just an idea. I thought I'd say it before I forget it, and then
That's recorded. Then we can remember.
yeah, definitely. But I think yeah, the way you explained it was really reassuring, and you know, because they can be daunting, can't they? These, when we say to people we're coming out, yeah. So it's just an idea, really. Maybe we can send a little something extra with the letters, or email over just so they know what to expect. And yeah, just an idea.
Definitely. I think we should always try to lessen the burden, don't we? So obviously there's earned recognition for those that are within the scheme, but I think it can be, when you get that letter, you can be a bit like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? So anything we can do to sort of ease that tension before we go is always a good idea, because it's not always easy to pick up the phone and explain it. It's sometimes easier to send the letter, for them to read it, and then for them to phone you back and once they've read it, because when you phone up and say, I want to come and do an inspection and I want to look at this, and you don't might speak to the right person. I think that's why sometimes an email or a letter first, and then them phoning you, or if you don't hear from them, phoning for confirmation, then you can reassure them a bit more. But I think if we can develop something, definitely.
No, cool. No, sounds good.
Would be a good idea.
Thanks, Beck. No questions about our procedure though, Beck. Don't worry. I should know what I'm doing.
We have got. We might be able to go to Rob with that request quite quickly, because he's come to me to say that if we're wanting any additional resources and stuff through the Rural Support Project, so it might be a good opportunity to just pop that as a request, because if they're going to do some leaflet, we might have to draw it up and design it, but basically if there's something that we can get, you know, if they could order us a few hundred or something to put in and see if it'd work, it might be now is a good time before Christmas to get that request in. So it would be worth, if you do it, send it to Chris, and then he'll send it on to Rob. So definitely let's get that done. That'll be a good one.
Yeah.
I was just going to add to when you were saying about sending them the letter and then maybe waiting for them to call you to confirm, or you ring them. I've had it a couple of times where the farmer, when I've actually gone to do the visit, has actually said, oh God, it was really awful getting that letter. And then when they spoke to me and I said to them, oh, I'll see you in a couple of days or whenever it was. And then actually I'd sort of broken the ice before the visit, and by speaking to them on the phone, and then when we got there, it kind of felt more familiar. And and a couple of times they said to me, actually, it was better, because when they first got the letter, they were like really anxious and sort of quite worried about it. But then actually after speaking, they kind of realised that, we're just humans, just like everybody else, and it's really not that bad. And, you know, it's just, we're just doing our job at the end of the day. And I think it put them at ease. So I definitely think
that once they speak to us, they realise that we are not old school anymore, and we are as helpful as we can be. You know, we just want to make sure that the standards are correct and that they're complying with the law, don't we, at the end of the day? So I think anything we can do to ease that initial shock for them, I think is a great idea. So if we can produce a short leaflet, like Becky said, just to sort of summarize it a bit and make it pretty, that might help them to digest what we're saying before we actually turn up. But it's a good idea.
Wondered as well, Kate, whether you guys go out with, we've got these little cards, I think it was Farmerados or something like that, made like a sort of concertina card, and on there it has like FCN, Rabbi, all the main kind of support services. And I didn't know if you have access to any of those.
So all our certification bodies work really closely with the different farming charities. So SAI Global, all their assessors have a farming help stick on the back of their laptop, because they do a lot of their data inputting on farm. So in essence, it's on the back of the laptop lid so that it's there for the member to see without having to be obtrusive, etc. But they're all engaged. And you know the little farming help book, he says, if it's ever unfortunate enough where we're having to revoke a membership or suspend it for a period of time, we will, the letter always says these are who, you know, the little speak to someone who understands agriculture. We'll put the phone numbers for the most appropriate one. You know, in Lincolnshire, they don't do, SCN isn't in Lincolnshire, they've got their own one, haven't they? So we always make sure it's the most appropriate one for the locality as well. I don't like writing those letters, believe me. When it gets to those sorts of choices, it's you know, it's a decision that many of us have to input into, and it's never an easy one. But we also make sure that, you know, if it's a livestock farm, I'll ring the vet as well, because one of our standards is who's the nominated vet. We'll ring them up just to make sure that, you know, they know that, yeah, and that in itself can be quite telling, and it starts that process more locally as well. So.
Oh, brilliant. That's good to hear, though. It's nice that, you know, I think now all agencies are a bit more tooled up with kind of like those support services that are just key to providing them some help when required, really. And I think we're all very much the same in that, you know, we don't want to take that enforcement hand, even though we kind of all have the ability to do that in our own way. But sometimes, and we have had farmers as well, like I was thinking of one that I think you dealt with, Becky, that actually he did speak to us afterwards, and even though we had to go down the enforcement route and remove his livestock, actually it did him the world of good, and actually he's kind of come back in a better you know, situation now. So I think that's extreme, but there are some that, you know, realize that they just needed us to kind of step in and sort things out, really.
Sometimes the generational ones as well, where it starts that conversation. You know, there's lots of support out there about succession planning and having those conversations, but sometimes that's not happened. And then you get to the stage where someone goes out, does an assessment, and it's not the best outcome, but that then starts that conversation in it, and it can turn them around a little bit. You know, we did unfortunately have to revoke someone for 4 weeks in the dairy sector, but they did come back to us and say, well, it was the best thing that could happen for the business, because it focused their attention. Said, did they all want to be dairy farmers? One of the brothers decided they didn't. So, you know, and it was unfortunate we had to get to that situation. But there was a positive outcome from it for that business. So yeah.
It can be a real relief sometimes, can't it, for people, you know, that they don't realise. I was with someone today, and, you know, just trying to, you know, we'd much rather reduce the herd, you know, just so we'd rather see them, you know, have a handful that are well kept and everything, just so to keep the hand in and everything, rather than, you know, having to go down the enforcement route. And yeah, it can be quite a relief sometimes to people when they realise when they haven't got to do all that work, or just encouraging them to keep stock during the spring and summer, and, you know, not the winter, and look after themselves in the winter.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you. Has anyone got any more questions before I move on? No. Well, can you see that okay? Is that come up on my screen?
It's in your presenter mode again, I think, but it's there.
It's there. Can you? It's just got you. You can see it.
Yeah.
I don't know why it does that. Anyway, basically, obviously, just to finish, it's really obviously the rural support webinars are obviously funded via the Future Farm Resilience. We've got up until December a few more months left for the funding, so we're going to try and hold a couple more webinars in November and a couple more in December. There is obviously still opportunity though to receive some one-to-one support, some digital training, some transition workshops. If you go on to the Business Information Point site, you will, and go onto the lists of events, you can see that what is still left and what is still left to run, and what also they will help you then to put you through to an agricultural advisor to let you know of what funding things are still on offer and how long you've got to apply for them. So I would strongly advise just giving them a call. It's all free support, so it would be worth getting in touch in case there is something that can help your farm or your farming family while it's still on offer. Also, yeah, if there's the business information point details. We're obviously still running the webinars, so we're gonna the list of events will still be up on the business information point site. We'll also advertise them via our trading standards website, and obviously email out to anybody that's been on the webinars previously. We'll try and keep you up to date with what things are available. I also just always like to share this slide with anyone that may not have been on the with one of us this evening. Just the Hub of Hope. Obviously, it's a webinar. It's a internet-based site. If you just Google Hub of Hope, this will come up, and it's a good way of getting in to see what's mental health supports charities are available closest to you. All you need to do is just put in your postcode, and you can click if there's a particular topic or a particular issue that you're wanting to see what support there is, whether it be anxiety. There's even a farming support tab on there, so you can just click that and it will give you what services are available and the miles that away from them that you are. So it's just that sort of what's in Devon isn't necessarily what's available in Somerset and obviously further up the country. So it's a really good site to remember and to use if as us as officers use it, but also just for your local people in your area. And I think that's it really. All that's left to say is thank you for attending, and thank you to our presenters for this evening, giving up your time and sharing all your information that you have available. If you do want to get in contact with us, there's a telephone number and email address on there. But if I just skip back, because I've updated it now, so I think we had an old email address. You can by all means just contact me directly, and I can pass any information and further questions on to our speakers from this evening. And I think that's it.
Thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you ever so much for
Kate,
joining.
Really good to hear from you.